Bearcat Blitz, taking you into the weekend here on the Believe Network. I'm your host, Russ Heltman. He's my co-host, Neil Meyer. We are presented by Bet Online, which is our great presenting sponsor, the most trusted betting platform in the world and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet of up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to baseball to Formula One racing. Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. Bet Online, the game starts here as we start up another episode of Bearcat Blitz. Coming to you on Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, YouTube, Talking Cats with Russ Heltman. Wherever you get your podcast, subscribe, rate, and review the show. Will help us grow and keep coming to you each and every week, twice a week, as we get into football season. It is nearly here, and we are, of course, already started up with practices in fall camp for Cincinnati. Neil will have his thoughts on the opening few days of camp, and we'll dive into all the great topics in the show after these messages from our great sponsors. Coming up in the show, though, we have Dante Corleone on the field both days so far to start camp, and was out there as we record in the morning here on Friday. And then we'll get Neil's early thoughts from fall camp the first couple of days. We will take a break and then some top takeaways from the coach press conferences earlier in the week, and we'll close out the show after that. Quick break here on Bearcat Blitz, then more great content right here on the Believe Network, presented by Bet Online. Neil, they are in full swing down at Nippert Stadium, getting ready to make the trip to Camp Higher Ground in just a couple of days. Bearcats fall camp, back at it. And, of course, the biggest story heading in was how much would we see of Dante Corleone at practice. Reports were that he was practicing with the team. He was with the team, obviously, according to head coach Scott Satterfield, and donning the yellow no-contact jersey. So, obviously, they're taking it easy on him. They're working him back slowly. But him being out there on the first day is a great sign for, fingers crossed, knock on wood, seeing him on the field in game action this season.
Yeah, absolutely, Russ. And not even just the first 2 days. He has been going through practice with the team, just doing a lot of individual stuff, as what Scott Satterfield and them have mentioned. Obviously, they're trying to ease him back into what the team will allow him and the trainers will allow him. But the main thing is he is out there donning the yellow contact jersey. We were able to watch him kind of go through some drills, individual drills the other day that he partook in. And Russ, great to say that he looked really close to what he was able to be back out there, especially coming off the offseason and dealing with that. I thought he was well ahead of anything dealing with that kind of life scare situation. And to be honest with you, it's just great to see him out there. You can see the vibes from everybody to see how happy they are to get Dante back out there. And we've heard it from everyone. We've heard it from Jalen Hunt. We've heard it from Corey Kiner. We've heard it from Coach Sat. We've heard it from a couple others about how his importance of him being back out there is huge for this team. D'Artagnan Tinsley called it revolutionary to have a guy like Dante Corleone back on the field. So that right there says everything that they need to know about how much Dante Corleone means to this team. And to hear the words revolutionary about him coming back from what he has dealt with this offseason, Russ, I think that says everything that you guys need to know about the status of Dante Corleone.
Quote from Jalen Hunt here on Wednesday. He's obviously filling in for Dante as the veteran kind of next man up on the interior of that defensive line. I'm trying to take a lot off of his plate, Hunt said in the media on Wednesday. Very optimistic about him coming back. I've just been stepping in for him, playing a little bit of nose guard and boundary end, doing a little bit of everything, make this pressure a lot lighter for everybody. And then you mentioned the comments from D'Artagnan Tinsley. Is just obviously a key leader for this team, a key part of this team, and it's just good to see him working his way onto the field fully. We'll see how quickly he can get rid of that yellow jersey and how quickly he can just be back to a normal participant. Obviously, they're not going to make it too quick, though. Have to put that health first. Neil, speaking of things coming first, your first initial thoughts on fall camp. I'll let you take it wherever you want to go.
Yeah, well, first off, you mentioned him briefly there. Jalen Hunt, I thought, has looked fantastic there, filling in for Dante Corleone. Coach Satterfield actually told us reporters that he walked into the office on Monday and said, "Coach, I feel like I'm in the best shape of my life right now." So you hear that statement and you're like, okay, that could be a great 1-2 punch for the Bearcats there up front. But obviously, Russ, we have to address the biggest takeaway from the first few days is losing Micah Coleman for the season. I think that's the biggest blow because obviously the situation with Dante Corleone, you didn't expect. The last thing you needed was another defensive caliber player that was going to see significant time go down. And it was a lower body injury for Micah Coleman that will keep him out for the season. So they are trying to get the medical red shirt that Satterfield told us on Tuesday. So that could be a good sign that he already had 2 years of eligibility. So if they get the medical red shirt, potentially have 3. But back to Jalen Hunt, Russ, I'm looking down at the roster right now. 6'4", 308 pounds is what they have him listed at. And man, he has looked very sharp throughout positional drills and individual drills throughout the first 2 days. I'm really liking what I've seen from middle linebacker the linebacker play. Jake Galladay, Russ, reminds me of an old school nitty gritty, I want to take the contact in the middle of the field kind of linebacker. For those who haven't really watched the film, 6'4", 245 pounds, no gloves, Russ. Anytime you see a linebacker with no gloves, you know he's about ball. So overall, I'm liking what I'm seeing from Jake Galladay there at the middle linebacker as well. But Jared Bartlett is also looking fantastic there. They're using him at that middle linebacker position as well. But they're going to do a lot of different things with him. But I think another big thing to talk about, Russ, was Brian Sims, redshirt freshman defensive end last year. Now makes the transition to middle linebacker this year. So I thought that was interesting. We saw it briefly in spring. I like what I see there from Brian Sims as well. And the defense. Trey Gallagher, Russ, is every bit of that 6'1", 6'2", 200-pound frame. Every bit of it there. Kai Stokes is being a very big vocal leader from some things I've early picked up on. But the secondary, I think, Russ, the biggest thing you can sense right now, despite having 48 new scholarship players, is the camaraderie, the brotherhood. Like, you can sense it. Like, they're doing some drills, Russ, where they were doing drills where it was a swing pass. The whole defense came and surrounded them, got together. Like, that's the stuff we didn't see last year at camp. Now this year, it's like, okay, we're all swarming to the ball. They're all making the plays. They're all just hyped. They're all talking about the brotherhood, the camaraderie. And Russ, even a couple of the guys, D'Artagnan Tinsley even said to the media too, he was like, man, I thought we let some things slide last season, and they're not doing that this year. Luke Kandra is all over the place as a veteran leader. Like, there is leaders from 1 to 95 or 110 on this roster, Russ. And that's the biggest thing, is they got guys in here who is going to buy in and be ready to turn this thing around. So there's a lot of positives to take away. I'm loving the tight end room as well. Obviously, Satterfield said that that's the most improved room. So there's a lot of things happening up there that's got me pretty excited, not going to lie.
Good few days to open things up for the Bearcats football program, despite the loss of Micah Coleman. That's going to be a big thing that we'll touch on. We'll dive into that and more in just a moment. But just the camaraderie you're talking about, Neil, we saw it in the spring. We've seen it in just kind of the whole message this summer is just how much more together this team is, how much everybody is rowing in the same direction compared to last year. And in the sport of football, we know how important that is. It's so important. Any big team sport, if you can't get on the same page as a group, it's going to be tough to overcome your lack of talent disparity on top of that, which was an even greater deficit last year than it is this year. And you add in the smaller talent deficit with a way more tight-knit team, you should have what Bearcats fans are expecting, a doubling of wins from 2023 compared to 2024, at least looking for 6 wins this coming season. I think that's a good bar to set, and the bar that they should be able to clear with this team, and especially if they can stay healthy. Neil, they are thin right now at edge. I said, they're going to need him for Brian Sims. They're going to need those linebackers, some of them to pop out, and some of them, namely Jared Bartlett, Jack Dingle with his speed. It looks like somebody's going to have to step up to be able to create a edge rush pressure this season, because it can't be all Dante Corleone and Jalen Hunt, and it can't be all Dante Corleone the entire year creating pressure. They're going to have to find somebody to stand out there on the defensive end, on the edge rusher side of things. I'm pretty sure, Neil, when you look at the players on this edge rushing unit from last season, there's not a lot of guys that got a lot of pressure last year that are returning. Eric Phillips had a down year. Who else? Rob Jackson had a down year. Kyrie Moiston didn't do a whole lot.
Playing time last year. Neither did Moiston. So that edge rusher position, it's slim pick right now.
It's thin, and that's kind of the biggest glaring weak spot, I would say, on this roster, because they obviously didn't anticipate this happening. You bring in a guy like Micah Coleman. He's a player who's a veteran, a guy who did a really good job last year at Eastern Michigan, 38 tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, and 29 pressures. Neil, I'm pretty sure the two starters combined now at the edge rushing spots that are projected, they don't have 29 combined pressures at all from last season. So that's the biggest thing they're going to have to kind of shore up. And that's kind of the biggest spot that you're looking to see who can rise above, who could take advantage of this open spot and really come in and say, hey, I can come in here and take full control of a wide open edge rush kind of hierarchy right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And Scott Satterfield, we did ask him about guys who would fill in for that position, obviously with Michael Coleman going down. But it basically sounds, as of right now, it's going to be, from what he said, it's something they're looking at by committee. He mentioned a few names in Tuesday's press conference. Darian Varner, the Wisconsin and Temple transfer. You have Rob Jackson, who is here. Didn't see significant time last season, but he was in the fold. Eric Phillips was probably going to be your lead guy. Obviously, he brings that experience there from playing for the last few years.
He will be. And Phillips had 27 pressures last year. He was okay in that department. And then like to see a little bit better production, but 67 overall pass rushing grade is solid, and he's probably going to be the guy that steps in as their top quarterback.
And he also mentioned true freshman Marquez Parker. So those were the four names that he mentioned when we asked about the guys who could step in and follow. But he basically said, as of right now, it's going to be by a committee, and obviously, Russ, the depth is the big difference on this team. I think everybody knows that. And, I mean, you see it up from the offensive line to the defensive line. The depth at all the certain positions is what really is the biggest turnover from last season to this upcoming season, was they have the depth at just about every position. Obviously, now with the defensive end, the edge position being a little thin right now, but the depth at every other position is there, just about to where you would have expected it to be.
Yeah, I sold the combined duo a little short. 27 pressures for Eric Phillips last year, and the two other guys that are kind of the veteran incumbents behind Micah Coleman, 1 for Rob Jackson, and 2 total at Wisconsin last year for Darian Varner. So just somebody's going to have to step up. Somebody's going to have to rise above the crop and see if they can kind of answer along with Eric Phillips to be the go-to 1-2 punch at the edge rushing spot. Overall, though, very positive first few days for Cincinnati football, despite the loss of Micah Coleman. The biggest thing was seeing Dante Corleone on that field. If he wasn't out there to start camp, if he was still kind of recovering and slowly going along, then it would be a brutal opening few days for that defensive line. As long as the Godfather is out there for the majority of the season, if not all of it, then that defensive front should be decent to solid, unless they start losing even more guys to injury, which, knock on wood, everybody can stay healthy through this fall camp. That would be ideal. Take a quick break here, and then Neil and I will get to our top takeaways from the opening press conferences of the season for Scott Satterfield, Tyson Veit, and Brad Glenn. All three big voices from the Bearcat program speaking on Tuesday. Neil, what was kind of the biggest thing you took away from any of the trio of press conferences we saw out of the program?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, Russ, there's obviously a few. I think the biggest one is hearing that the coaches say that there is accountability from the players. Scott Satterfield mentioned that if players haven't been on time to anything this summer, like they were just maybe a minute late to a workout or something like that, the players are telling them to get out. That was something that really has emphasis and honed in on from the tough offseason led by strength and conditioning coach Nico Palazetti. So overall, hearing that, like, the accountability is there. We have heard it from Corey Kiner. We have heard it from a guy like D'Artagnan Tinsley, Luke Kander, that they're embracing the leadership role and they are holding people accountable. And Gavin Gerhardt's another big leader. If you watch throughout Camp Russ too, Gavin Gerhardt's in there just about every play being the leader that he is as well. So there's a lot of leaders stepping in. The vocal leadership, I think that's the biggest thing too, is it's not even just the captains or the guys who are returning. It's you're seeing some of these younger guys who are coming in and holding others accountable about what they are doing. So hearing that, I think that's the biggest thing. They're all coming together. And I think once you have that accountability, that discipline that Scott Satterfield has mentioned that they got to play with, now that discipline and the accountability is there, I think that's the biggest thing. Like, they're going to turn some heads potentially this season just by how well collective they are as a whole. So they're very collective. They're very going. And that starts with good veteran leadership. And I think Cincinnati has that. But then you turn the focus to some other takeaways. The tight end room, Russ, I mentioned it briefly. Scott Satterfield said that is the most improved position from a season ago. And I mean, you look at on paper of it, the guys who they had there last season at tight end, they had to use Trevor Radozovic, a backup reserve offensive lineman, as a tight end starting in the BYU game. Russ, that was week 5 last season. They had to use him as a backup tight end all the way throughout the season because players were banged up. So then you lose Shimon Mateer to Colorado, who's now at Arizona State. The tight end position went a complete overhaul after Joey Belgian missed the season due to injury. But Belgian returns. You bring in Joe Royer, who is looking fantastic throughout camp. And, I mean, Russ, he is every bit of that 250-pound, 6'5" tight end, and you can do a lot of different things with them. But Scott Satterfield even said it himself. They want to get the tight ends involved, whether that's in the run game, the pass game, the throw game, whatever it might be. Seeing the tight ends completely overhaul, I think that's the biggest takeaway, Russ, too, because obviously you and I have watched. We've talked about it. You look down on paper, you have Devin Zahersky, who's a big 6'5" target, true freshman. Gavin Grover, a 6'6", almost 6'7", big target, 250 pounds. Joe Royer, 6'5". They have, and Joey Belgian, 6'5". They have the talent, the size right there. They didn't have that a season ago. So I think that's going to be a key thing, a key component to this offense, hopefully, throughout this 2024 season. But now you turn to the defensive side of the ball. Man, I'm loving the linebacker room, Russ. I love what I'm seeing from them. Really seeing a lot of leadership there. Multiple different guys are stepping in. So there's a lot of good takeaways to see there. And I think if you ask Coach Vite, he's pretty excited for what he has to work with there in that linebacker room as well.
Vite's comments about the secondary stood out to me. This is a secondary that ranked 10th worst in terms of overall team PFF coverage grade in 2023. They had a 59 overall grade, and they worked in a lot of new guys, a lot of new faces here, and he touched on that. It's for Vite, he said, quote, "We've got a hungry, competitive group that collectively they've got an outstanding work ethic, so I feel like we have a chance that way, and naturally we need to stay healthy." So obviously health going to play a huge role, especially on the back half of the season for that unit. You want to keep those guys as fresh as possible, but that stood out to me the most, just how much they are overhauling this secondary and how much this 3-3-5 defense is going to rely on that back end and the ability of that back end to hold up, especially if they aren't getting as much anticipated pressure this season as we might have thought with Michael Coleman going down and not being available for the entire 2024 slate. A lot to cover, a lot to key in on over the next weeks, and months in the land of Bearcats football. For Neil Meyer, I'm Russ Heltman. We'll have you covered right here on Bearcat Blitz. Have a great weekend, everybody. Presented by Bet Online.
6, Ritter to the end zone, looking for Pierce. Did he hang on? Yes. Touchdown. Back as I've been around. Here he goes again. Busts free. Jerome Ford down the sideline. Foot race. House call. Touchdown.